Good morning. Welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. Joining me today, my good friend and special guest, Russ Cook. All right, here we go. Cook Tillman Law Group in Brentwood, Tennessee. I got it. You know, I've known Russ for so long, and of course, we've been doing the show almost as long as that. I think 15 years anyway. Yeah. And this is one of the things when you're used to the whole time. Russ Cook and Associates over in Brentwood, it's hard to retrain yourself. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. All right. Only the ultra wealthy. Back on misconceptions of trust. So Russ, on this one, this is one of those areas, and I know you deal with the ultra wealthy as well, and you do a lot of advanced planning and getting into foundations and all kinds of really cool things for them. But that's not the run of the mill. I mean, let's face it, there's not that many ultra wealthy out there for us to deal with every day.
No, there aren't. But that doesn't mean that you don't want to do your planning with revocable trusts. I think the misconception is that if you are looking to get a trust done, that you have to have a bunch of money in order to justify doing it. Revocable trusts have a place in just about every estate plan. As Hank has mentioned, they help in avoiding probate. If you're a married couple and you have assets that have gone up in value, like your home, a revocable trust can help not only make sure everything goes to the spouse and on to the kids without any hiccups, but also it makes sure that you're taking advantage of an income tax benefit that you otherwise would not have if you weren't doing your planning with a revocable trust. That is to get a full cost basis step up at first death on those assets. So there's no reason for us to say that it's only for the ultra wealthy. I think it's kind of a mainstream document now if you think about the estate plans that people are doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we talk about, in my book, I reference the 5 essential documents that make up the foundation of a good estate plan. And I've got to say, for most of my clients, with rare exception, they all have revocable trusts. All right, and sometimes we get into more advanced planning, like with charitable trusts and the like. And this is, again, not something that's just for the wealthy. This can work very well as a, for even more modest estates. Now let's talk about uses of trust. So on uses of trust, we've got transfer. Well, I'm sorry, I left off one thing. Time consuming. Trusts do take more time. Okay, in the sense that you're going to then a will. You go in for a will. Everything's about when you're gone, okay? But with a trust, it's dealing with things during your lifetime as well, or while you're still living, including thinking of, this is one that people don't think of a lot of times with trust, but that of incompetency. What if you became incapacitated? God forbid you have a stroke. Who's going to take care of your stuff for you? It's a lot easier to administer an estate or to help take care of someone's needs if it's in a trust. It's more, it's easier to work with the different financial institutions as a successor trustee on a trust account than, say, with a power of attorney. So there's some, though you want both, just understanding that when it comes to time consuming, yes, it takes a little more time to set up a trust than it does a will, but it's time well invested in the long term. It's going to save, again, time. All right, uses of trust, transfer of wealth, paid estate taxes, managing your estate, of course, controlling distributions, protecting heirs from creditors, avoiding probate, providing for charity, providing for future generations, a lot of different uses for trusts. And of course, first and foremost is typically transfer of wealth. Where do I want my stuff to go when I'm gone? Okay, and Russ, this is one of those areas that, and of course the asset protection features you can provide your children, if assuming it's going on down the staying in the family, going on down the bloodline. But transfer of wealth, and you deal with it in a lot of different ways, not just with revocable trusts, though that's usually the starting point.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is up to this point, we've been talking about revocable living trusts. Those are trusts that you create in order to transfer your assets at death and avoid the probate process and get some additional benefits. There are also other trusts that are created in order to address specific situations. One is a trust that's created at your death. So you can have a revocable trust that basically is for your benefit until you pass. and then at your passing, it turns into an irrevocable trust, or what Hank has mentioned, a testamentary trust, that then protects the inheritance that you're providing for your kids. And you can still set this up so that the kids have access and control over the assets, and yet it's not subject to third-party claims, divorce claims, ex-spouse, whatever it is that comes up during the child's life, which is a very useful tool.
This is one of those areas when it comes to, so thinking of our children in particular, and as Russ said, with a trust, when you leave things to them in trust, when you leave it to them in trust, they have now asset protection features that the trust provides that they wouldn't otherwise have. And as Russ just said about divorce is one of the more common ones when, when that in-law is becomes an outlaw, you don't want them taking half of what you've intended to stay in your family that you've left for your child off with them, and who knows where it ends up, right? They remarry and kids there, and off it goes sideways, and your family in essence has been disinherited by that. So this is one way to protect your heirs is through not just leaving your assets to them, but leaving it to them in trust. Easier to manage the estate, controlling distributions. If you've got, in a family situation, maybe someone that doesn't do as well with money, maybe they have an addictive lifestyle, special needs, and you're needing to set up some, within your trust, you can have language where it's left in trust to them, but left in such a way where they're not going to be in control of it. And this is, it's a choice, right? You can either, if they're responsible, they can be their own trustee, or if there's an issue where we're concerned that, and we've had a number of these, of course, over the years, where someone in addictive lifestyle being the most common one, where we'll set up this special needs or this special trust, rather, leaving it to them in trust, but with someone else in charge who's going to take care of their needs, but not where they can control the money.
Yeah, and that's where it's important to make sure that you're setting your estate plan up for success, not failure. Because if you dump a bunch of money on someone who's suffering from addiction, that's just going to make the situation much, much worse. Same with other special situations, like if you have a special need child that requires some additional help, they can't manage finances, and a lot of times they're on government benefits. And if you were to pass an inheritance to them, they may end up losing those benefits. And so what we do is structure the estate plan so the assets stay in trust, and we call it a supplemental needs trust because it only pays out to the extent the child needs money beyond the government benefits, and that way we preserve those benefits. Sometimes you want to make sure that the assets are paid out as incentive to the child. Let's say you want to set it up so that it matches W-2s or 1099s. You can set it up that way too. Those are incentive trusts. You can set up trusts to allow for a certain amount going to a child, and then when the child passes, it goes to charity. There's not really much that you can't do with the trust as far as allowing assets to go on after you've passed to carry out your wishes.
There you go. All right. I talked to a gentleman earlier this week, and one of the things that, and this had to do with the structure of a trust. So just some common things that I want to touch upon, common terms, as well as some basics when it comes to estates, is understanding the parties to a trust. So Russ, and this can be a little confusing when you have terms that mean the same thing, different terms like a grantor, a settlor, and a trustor. So let's talk a little bit about these common terms, but also the basics of structure of a trust, the trustor, the trustee, the beneficiary, that type of thing.
So getting back to our example of a revocable trust that you'll set up during your life, when you set that trust up, you are the grantor or trustor or settlor. All three of those terms mean the same thing. You're the one creating the trust. Then there's the trustee. That's the person who's in charge of the assets and has to carry out your wishes according to the trust terms. Now, when you set up a revocable trust, that is you again. You're wearing that hat. So you've got two hats so far. You're the grantor and the trustee. And then there's the person who benefits from the trust. That's the beneficiary. So in a revocable trust setting, that's going to be you again who's going to receive a benefit from the trust. If you set up a trust for someone else, or let's say you have a revocable trust and you pass, then the trustee will end up being someone else, someone that takes over that responsibility of managing the assets and distributing the assets according to your wishes after you've passed away. And that will be the successor trustee. And then there's still the beneficiary. In that case, it might be a child or a grandchild or a spouse who you want to set the trust up for. So all of these different terms mean something. Some of them are overlapping, but just know that when we set things up, we make sure that they're set up according to your wishes and you get the right people in the right spots to do what you want.
Yeah, in fact, what we're going to do, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll give you a practical example of how that would work for you and how we typically see it work with the families that we work with. But first, a break. Join us here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.